Hey guys, this is round two of our way too early 2023 rookie mock draft. If you missed the first round, watch this video first. Don't just click away. We'll have the first round linked at the end of this video, but at least you can get a sense for the second round rookies in this way too early Superflex rookie mock draft. We're back at it with the 2.01. I'm gonna go, and I kind of hinted at it at the end of the round one video. 2.01 here. I'm gonna go with Tank Bigsby out of Auburn. I feel like this is probably, I think it has to be at this pick at this point. I think there is one other player that I would consider here at the 2.01. But as of right now, I'm just going to go with the running back, go with a 3-year producer in the SEC out of Auburn. His numbers look all right. You know, I feel like I thought that he produced better than he actually did. But, you know, overall, he really excels, I think, in the passing game. I think he's a really good athlete. Obviously, he's shown that he can be a workhorse running back as well. I'm just hoping that he ends up getting the draft capital necessary for him to be able to be picked here at the 2.01, find himself in a situation maybe like a Dameon Pierce or something like that, where if he slips a little bit, he finds that one landing spot where he can excel at, and then we love taking him at the 2.01.
The narrative around Tank Bigsby has been interesting to watch, because if you look at this time last season, Tank Bigsby was included with Jahmyr Gibbs. He was included with Bijan Robinson because he was looking like, right, he's about to just burst out and just be potentially a very, very good NFL running back. Mm-hmm. And I was all in. Like, I was like, this is a part of that class that I am excited to have.
Right.
And this season was just a bit of a letdown. Like, he's more efficient on the ground this year. He caught more passes. That, like, those two things are great, but you just didn't see, again, like a game-changing growth, a game-changing type of player that a lot of us thought he could be or could turn into. And it really feels, and we talked about it at the very end of the round one mock draft, he can get Isaiah Spillard, like a guy that is very productive in college, looks to be kind of toolsy, right? But doesn't get the NFL draft capital. And that's why watching him is going to be really, really interesting, because if he gets day 2 draft capital, I do think the running back tier 3, right? Tier 2, tier 3 gets deeper, and it becomes a significantly more interesting debate in dynasty circles, where if he falls to day 3, I don't know how highly I'm taking him, pending landing spot. Moving to 202, I think this is the other guy, probably the only other guy that's really in contention to get picked here, and it's Josh Downs out of UNC. People that are like die-hard analytics guys are going to love Josh Downs, right? You're looking at a guy with an 87th percentile breakout age, a 35.6 college dominator rating, and then again, a guy with a 99th percentile college target share. Like, those are the types of things when you plug those numbers into a model, Josh Downs is going to come out and look very, very good. The flip side of this is Josh Downs isn't a big dude. Like, if he, right now, and I'm looking at Player Profiler, he is listed at 5'10", 180. That means you're probably looking at a guy that's like 5'9", 175. That feels like what he's actually going to come in at. And because of that, he'll probably profile in the slot. So that does limit some of the upside here.
I see also a little bit Jahan Dotson, though. Dotson came in. He was 5'11", 175 when he came in as well. And basically, the knocks that were on Dotson was he was a 4-year guy. Took a little bit longer to produce because he was behind KJ Hamler, behind Pat Fryermuth. But once he started producing, he was that guy. But Josh Downs is basically that, just early declare, 1 year ahead in producing and everything like that. So, you love to see that he produced with Sam Howell. He was a massive contributor, 101, 1,308 last year. This year doing basically the exact same thing with Drake May. And you love to see all of the production. Like you said, the analytics absolutely love Josh Downs. And I think the film honestly will too. It's just going to be a matter of how big of a concern is the size going to be, which I don't necessarily think it will be when we live in an NFL where guys like Amon-Ra, Jahan Dotson, Elijah Moore, Rondale Moore, Christian Kirk, these guys exist and succeed in the NFL and for fantasy. So I'm hoping Josh Downs can just come in and join that kind of group and be fantastic. So with the 2.03, then I'm going to go with TCU running back Kendre Miller, who I think is going to be honestly one of my favorite guys in this second round, and even in this early second, like we have here at the 2.03. Kendre Miller to me checks off a lot of the boxes, and he actually is one of the few running backs in this class that I think has more prototypical workhorse running back NFL size. He's 6 foot, 220 pounds. That's what TCU has him listed at. He has good speed. He had the production at TCU. I just really like a lot of what Kendre Miller can bring to the table. The Philadelphia Eagles, they let Miles Sanders go, draft Kendre Miller. That would be a fantastic situation that I could see, really happening in that late second round NFL draft range. That would, I think, honestly, something like that happening could bump Miller into the back half of the first. So to grab him here at the 2.03 with that kind of upside, I think is really enticing.
Yeah, he's absolutely one of those guys that I think post NFL draft could see a very nice climb right in ADP, and that makes me a little nervous in its own right. But I don't think he's going to grade out crazy well at the combine. I don't think you look at Kendre Miller and say, freak athlete, like top end traits. And that's probably the only knock I have against him is, like, I don't think he's a 4.4 speed guy. I don't think he's the quickest burst, right? The most agile. Like, he doesn't have those types of traits, but he's just a good runner. Like, he is a very good running back, great vision. I wish he did more when Zach Evans was there. That's one of the things I look at. I'm like, Zach Evans is a little bit better. But again, I think he's still very good in his own right. So jump into 204 here. This is a guy, again, I think is probably going to fill a very similar role to Kendre Miller in the NFL, and that is Zach Charbonnet out of UCLA. Now, obviously, a lot of us thought he should have left last year. I think as an early declare, he would have been probably the RB3 in this class. Like, that, he had that type of caliber season. And then he comes back, obviously, 4th year at UCLA and puts up the best season of his career. Fewer carries, 200 additional yards, a career high in receptions, receiving yards, touchdowns. Like, he kind of did everything you wanted to see when he went back to school, right? If he came back and had a very plateau type of season, I'd be significantly more concerned. But he got better. He looked like he really didn't belong in college anymore. He has a really good package in terms of making guys miss. His spin move is fairly nasty. But again, it's very similar where I just don't think he's going to grade out as a top-end athlete. He's going to be one of those probably career rotation running backs who early on might push for, a chance at a 3-down role.
Yeah, I do really like Charbonnet a lot as well, too. I was actually going through some of my like early grades for this running back class overall, and Charbonnet actually doesn't really turn out to be graded all that well in at least my process and what I'm going through and the check boxes that I'm looking at analytically. But I think a lot of that stems from the fact that he didn't do anything at Michigan. But a lot of those answers of what can he do when he is the guy were all obviously answered very easily at UCLA. I feel like he's just a guy in this mix of could be really interesting, could be nothing, not really sure. Like a Jerome Ford kind of fits that for me too. Like, Jerome Ford was hyper productive at Cincinnati, falls to day 3 as just this guy, and plummets in dynasty value. But at the same time, Jerome Ford was one of my favorite pickups in rookie drafts, so that might be something that we look forward to. And maybe that means that Charbonnet isn't a high or mid second round pick, but he's one of the favorite 3rd round picks that a lot of people take.
We're at this point, I think, in the draft, and I think we cross it after 202, at least right now, where everybody we're talking about from this point on could be absolutely destroyed by the NFL. Like, this is where the NFL has so much more detail and nuance into their scouting system, right? We're just looking at the things fantasy people look at. And like, I'm saying, a good runner, a guy that catches the ball well, that produced back-to-back seasons when he was, not necessarily handed but earned a job. And there's all these other nuances that the NFL puts in, right, where guys slip and we don't know why. Charbonnet, Miller, those are 2 guys that if you told me they got taken in the 3rd, yeah, I'd believe it. If you told me they got taken in the 6th, like, sure, yeah, why not? So this is where guys take it all with a grain of salt, right? These players, their values will shift dramatically from December 20th to sometime in mid-April when we draft.
All right, so at the 2.05 here, I'm going to take what I think is like a massive home run swing right now. I am going to take Jalin Hyatt out of Tennessee. There's enough to like, but there's also a lot that are, just shows a crippling downside floor for Hyatt. I mean, so let's talk about the positives first. Obviously, what he did this year, and I guess what he's continuing to do this year. He's got, over 1,200 yards on 67 receptions, 18.9 yards per reception, 15 touchdowns. He is absolutely an electric, explosive, deep ball playmaker. I think he was clocked in at running like a 4.31 or something like that. Like when at some point during his college career, he is also a track athlete, just like Sean Tucker was. So maybe I just like these guys that can just run really, really fast, and not only on the football field but also in track and field. But Hyatt could be, a cheaper version of John Ross, a Christian Watson kind of player that if he lands in a good situation on day 2, then we could see ourselves really talking ourselves into Jalin Hyatt and his upside. But the floor, he didn't do anything the first 2 years of his career at Tennessee, like literally nothing. He had, before this season, 40 receptions for 500 yards and 4 touchdowns combined in 2 years. And then, bam, 2022, massive breakout.
Analytically, he might grade out as like one of the worst wide receivers that people are going to like actively talking about in this class. Cause heading into this season, his high of a dominator rating was 11.1%. His breakout age is currently however old he is. But then you watch him on the field and you're looking at a guy that can torch everybody on any given play. And I do think the change in production is at least a little bit noteworthy because they did switch up the offensive scheme this year. They spread it out a little bit more. They gave him a little bit more space. So that could be a huge benefit, right? You can say, okay, well, when he's given more of a college-friendly, wide receiver-friendly offense, he did something. But again, you can't just completely discount nothing happening for 2 years and being like, I think it's fine. Moving to 206, it is Marvin Mims out of Oklahoma. Let me lay it out really quick. He is currently listed at 5'9", 177. That's small. Like that again, that is me. That is my size. I should not be running routes. However, Marvin Mims is an absolute burner. After the catch, he is extremely fun to watch. And again, this is where you're looking at, even though he's a slot guy, he possesses upside because of the physical tools, not size and stature, but speed, agility, quickness, that could make him a potential difference maker at the NFL. He's going to be really, really scheme dependent. He has to land in a coach that is willing to utilize him the right way. And that's usually a very bad thing for a wide receiver. Like that's not a positive. But if he lands with a creative head coach, Marvin Mims very well could turn into a very solid wide receiver 3 with some wide receiver 2 upside. I think that's the type of player you're looking at because, again, he's going to operate out of the slot, and that's usually not super conducive to, monster fantasy seasons.
I hate the phrase, if he lands in the right situation with the
terrifying
right coach, like that, those types of players feel very gadgety at the NFL level. And they're just players that I'm just not interested in because they
totally fair.
They need these packages in their offense that are designed specifically to get them the ball. And then they got to hit on those, you're relying on them. They get 1 or 2 shots a game and they could hit and they could have 20 fantasy points, or they could not catch that pass or catch the pass and get tackled for 2 yards. There's just such inconsistency on a weekly basis, let alone a yearly basis, for them to be anything fruitful. So these are always just guys that I just tend to just shy away from. I'll just let somebody else take them. I'll pick them up when they're on waiver wires in a year, and that'll be the end of it, you know? So
Rondale Moore is his best case scenario here. And Rondale Moore is turning into a good football player. And I think Mims could do that. I don't expect a ton year one. I really don't. I think he'll be in that rookie faceplant territory, but I think with potential to escape it, because again, he's going to need to develop as an actual wide receiver.
let's shake things up here in this draft.
I like
the
this.
2.07. I'm gonna go because this is super flex. So, you know, we drafted the 4 quarterbacks in the first round who are probably most likely going to be all first round picks. Maybe somebody slides into the second. But at the quarterback 5, you know, there's always those quarterbacks that we have potential, you know, they're a second round pick. They land somewhere as a backup, you know, do all that kind of stuff. I'm going to take Hendon Hooker here because of the season that he is having right now, which honestly, he's done this basically 2 years in a row. Like, if you look at his numbers, there's nothing really this season that he has done that is just so far and away better than what he did last year. This is 2 years in a row now at Tennessee where he has thrown for, I'm going to call it 3,000 yards. You know, basically around 30 touchdowns. He's at 31 last year, 27 this year. I think Hendon Hooker could be one of those guys in round 2 of the NFL draft that we like enough in terms of the landing spot that he got. Maybe one of the teams like, you know, the Panthers or the Falcons or the Colts, they pass on somebody in the first round. They go Hendon Hooker, and we're waiting for them to just kind of take over, like what we have with Desmond Ridder and Malik Willis and guys like that this year. So I'm going to take in Superflex Hendon Hooker and just kind of see what happens as we go throughout the draft process. And he could be totally destroyed by the NFL draft, or he could be the guy that I just mentioned and actually be somewhat of a solid, usable backup Superflex quarterback.
I love Hendon Hooker as a college quarterback. Like, he is a very, very good college quarterback. And a lot of that has to do with the system that Tennessee operates out of, right? If he can develop as a true NFL passer, make those right anticipatory throws, the decision-making on the fly, that is going to allow him to be great. Can he do that? I genuinely have no idea. And that is why Hendon Hooker, I think, is a little bit scary, and he will be for the NFL as well, because you just haven't seen much of him operate that would translate to the NFL. Moving to 208, I'm torn here because we did a little switch up, so I got 2 running backs on my list that I like. I think I'm going to stick with my guy, though, and I'm going to take Chase Brown here, the call it breakout star at U of I, and being a guy from Chicago. Everybody I know went to U of I. I've done nothing but hear about Chase Brown for 4 months now. And admittedly, he's looked great. Like, he has turned into, right, like just a flat out great runner. 1,600 yards, 27 receptions, 13 touchdowns through on the ground and through the air. He's just a good runner. This late, I am happy to take a shot on one of those uber productive college backs. Chase Brown very well could turn into, and I think best case is a high-end handcuff in the NFL. I think that is really probably where he ends up finding dynasty value. Chase Brown is interesting. He has the ability to catch the ball. That's the biggest piece for me when I'm drafting running backs late. He's not just going to be a between the tackle guy, although he's proven to be very effective at that. So Chase Brown, an interesting, I don't even know if it's an upside pick, but I think just a talented player that probably is more valuable on your dynasty bench than he ever will be in the NFL.
It's hard whenever you get down to this range to actually find guys that you feel like are going to actually be on your dynasty roster for more than a year or two, or actually contribute in some meaningful way in your starting lineup. But the guys that usually do that are most likely these handcuff kind of running backs. These guys that, you know, they start out as the RB3, they ascend to the RB2, they, you know, cut into a, you know, the main players work and you know, rush attempts and stuff like that. A Khalil Herbert and Elijah Mitchell, one of those kind of guys that is, you know, just enough of a change of pace and a little bit more explosive because he's a little younger than the main starting running back. That is the guy that I think Chase Brown could, you know, ultimately end up being. And then, like you said, because he's a handcuff, if that starter were to go down, you know, you have a guy that you can just plug in right immediately into your roster as a top 20 running back, scores a touchdown, top 15, top 10. That's what you're looking at with Chase Brown. And I really, really like this pick. I'm actually really jealous that you took Chase Brown.
Love it.
because I'm
Yeah.
really in.
Well, he does feel like a guy that gets drafted fifth, fourth, fifth round, I think, in that range.
Mhm.
And honest to God, I wouldn't be surprised. You mentioned Khalil Herbert. I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up in Chicago with David Montgomery out the door as a day 3 pick to just kind of give them depth behind Khalil Herbert, because they're not necessarily similar players, but they have a similar enough skill set where Herbert's a little more athletic.
Mhm.
But Chase Brown very well could be a handcuff on a team like Chicago with a running back that hasn't necessarily stayed 100% healthy his first 2 seasons. So again, that's the best case scenario for him, and I'm fine with that. Again, I'd rather take handcuff running backs than deep shot wide receivers. Running backs are, one, what you have a lot sooner, and two, they're more likely to find value in year 1 and 2 than some of these late round wide receivers that we're probably going to be getting into in a second.
Which is why I think he's a better pick than who I'm going to take here at the 2.09, which I like Zay Flowers out of Boston College. I do like him. I think his overall profile is really, really strong. I wish he wasn't a 4-year guy, but that's, you got to take your lumps when you're down this far. He is a little bit smaller. He's 5'10", 170, but that's about the same size as we saw with Josh Downs. He's not going to be an immediate producer. I don't expect him to be. And I think that you're going to have to wait a little bit, but I could see him being one of those guys that a lot of people out there, if you draft him this late, that you're just chilling him on your taxi squad and you're just kind of seeing what happens, because he could end up being one of those guys that really does start to produce well enough for fantasy that that you're comfortable in still having him on your roster in year 2, in year 3. I don't mind taking the shot on a really productive wide receiver here in Zay Flowers.
He feels like a guy that could earn a cult following almost through the draft process here. Like he feels like you said, early day 3, where people are like, man, if he just gets in the right spot, because he produces at every level, and on the field at least. Like, he can run underneath. He's fine going over the middle and working the intermediary, and then he has enough speed to be dangerous deep. So Zay Flowers is a 3-level type of guy. He's crazy fun to watch. Like, when you put him in space, that's great as well. The knocks just come from, I think, like he drops the ball more than people would care to see, especially at the NFL level. For fantasy, I don't care about drops, but if NFL teams do, then I do. That's kind of how that works. And again, he, like you said, the smaller stature, just that there's so many of these small-ish, maybe slot wide receivers that just really takes a lot of the fun out of like projecting upside, because I just don't project a ton of upside out of guys that are going to be, 5'9" and change. So at the 210, this is a guy that a lot of people thought actually might come out last season, ended up not. It is Rashee Rice. And so out of SMU, if you're unfamiliar, we've been talking about all of these smaller slot wide receivers, all these guys that aren't, prototypical NFL types. Rice is not that. Rice is currently listed 6'3", 205. He has the build, the size to hopefully develop into a very, very good wide receiver. And we saw some of that at SMU this season. Now, obviously, competition is a large question mark there. But again, 96 for 135 and 10. That is the type of production you at least want to see from a guy that has been in college as long as he has. What he does not have is, elite route running by any stretch of the imagination. He is an extremely limited route runner, and that needs to change if he wants to do anything at the NFL level. Now, that is where landing spot comes into play, I think, because the coaching staff needs to be able to coach him up as a true wide receiver. They don't need to get creative with using him. They just need to make sure he can actually develop and fill out the frame and become the guy that a lot of people think he could be. He's a guy late that I'm going to be drafting a ton of, just because of how few prototypical NFL wide receivers are in this class. And again, the upside to me is what's intriguing. Although, again, like with everybody else here, if he doesn't develop, he could basically vanish in a year and a half.
I do like that, at least he went to SMU. SMU, at least in terms of small schools with wide receivers, has a little bit of a track record. Most notably, they had Cortland Sutton, Emmanuel Sanders, who, if you look at Emmanuel Sanders' collegiate career, looks very similar to Rashee Rice's as well, who just kind of every single year got a little bit better, had that big breakout fourth season. Rice looks like he could be a guy that maybe is not a wide receiver one for an NFL team, but could be like a really strong wide receiver two, like a Michael Gallup kind of player. I think that's kind of the ceiling that we're looking at.
I mean, look at all of my draft picks I've made over both videos. I am very much a let's find guys with tools and hope to God they develop type of drafter. Like, that has always been my model, because 9 times out of 10, I'm going to swing for the fence. This draft class doesn't have a lot of those guys. That's the reason he's just so intriguing to me this late.
So it's funny you were to mention guys that have the tools, the traits, the measurables. Because here at my pick at the 211 for my final pick, I'm going with Texas A&M's Devon Achane. When you talk about a guy that has just shot out of a cannon kind of speed, that is Devon Achane. People were talking about him being the better Texas A&M back last year over Isaiah Spiller. Very efficient on the ground. I mean, he's averaging over 6 yards a carry. He had 8.5 yards a carry his freshman season, 7 yards a carry as a sophomore. That efficiency dropped a little bit, but that's what's going to happen whenever you take on more volume. You never stay that efficient with more volume, but he does have the receiving ability. He is small. He is a very small running back. Like we were joking a little bit before the show, he's not Deuce Vaughn small, but he's just like whatever the next step is above Deuce Vaughn, that is where Achane lives. I do fear that the NFL is going to typecast Achane as a Tariq Cohen, as a Nyheim Hines, as a James White, which is really going to limit the ceiling and the just overall fantasy production that we get out of him. But I could see Achane being a Tony Pollard kind of player, this guy that is a more of a 1B in an offense, and we're always just yearning, why does this guy just not get more touches? He's so much more electric, so much better, all that kind of stuff.
He gives me Giovanni Bernard vibes, like big time Giovanni Bernard vibes. I like to think of him as like the elder statesman of the small running back group. He has speed to burn, and like young Giovanni Bernard, he was fun out of UNC. Like, he was shifty as hell. Giovanni Bernard, his rookie year, I remember watching him because they were using him with Jeremy Hill in that weird split, and he was just impossible to bring down. The first guy was not taking him down, not because of power, because trust me, him and Achane do not have power, but the package of moves they have, it's video game like, which is where, again, the Tariq Cohen comps can come in as well. So he has those types of things. Again, it's just a matter of finding a coach that is willing to utilize him, and a lot aren't. And that's the concern, and it's going to be the concern with our last pick here as well. These smaller running backs, just, you need to find a coach that is willing to utilize them and not just see, 5'8" or 5'9" and go, no chance. So he's just going to be very interesting in that respect. I do think he probably ends up bringing like flex value because of the receiving upside. I think he very well could carve out a role for his NFL career, and that could be it. But again, as a handcuff, all of these guys, I'm thinking like handcuffs. He's a guy I'd be happy to plug in should a starter go down. One of the other small running backs, it's not Deuce Vaughn. It's not the smallest running back, but it's pretty close. And it's Blake Corum out of Michigan. Mm-hmm. Corum, even for his size, though, again, you're looking at like 5'8". He's still listed at 200 pounds. Like, he's not gonna be. He's beefy for his size, like for his stature. He fills out the frame, and he is truly a power runner, a la Maurice Jones-Drew. Like, if you're thinking small bowling ball humans, it's Blake Corum and MJD. Like, that's them. The nice thing with him is he flashed more as a wide receiver in his sophomore year, which to me, that kind of eases some of my concerns about him saying, well, he didn't catch anything his senior year, right? 11 for 80. That's not impressive. But you go back, you look a year, right? 24 for 141. That does show some of the 3-down capability should someone go down, right? He can fill a pass-catching role, although I don't think that's ever going to be his main role like Achane is, right? Like, that's the difference here. I kind of almost think I wish I would have taken him over Chase Brown, because I think Corum has a better shot to have a early career role than Chase Brown does, most likely, pending his knee surgery and getting healthy.
I even just saw the clip just earlier today where he was talking with Adam Schefter and saying basically he's still 50-50 on if he's even declaring. Does he want to come back and prove that he's healthy at a collegiate level back from the meniscus tear?
So you have to have a decision by then. Are you telling me that you haven't made a decision in your mind?
I'm 50-50. I have not made a decision.
50-50.
I am 50-50.
There's a part of me that hopes that he does declare because I think Donovan Edwards is just a lot better. And I don't want Corum to mess up Edwards' final season before he declares. My fear with Blake Corum is if he does declare, that knee surgery is going to tank him in terms of draft capital, just because a team is going to have to sit there. They're going to have to wait. They're already, Corum was already a guy that was like probably could potentially go on day 3 or late day 2. But then you throw in needs basically a year to get healthy, rehab, get healthy, get onto the field. So basically his rookie season, you're not going to basically get him at all for 2023. You're going to be looking at 2024 for him. He could be a 6th or 7th round pick, but he could be one of those guys that despite that, draft capital actually ends up succeeding at the next level because he has everything else going for him. He just fell just because of injury and surgery and whatnot. And then once he gets over that hump, he should be good to go. So that concludes our 2-round Superflex way too early 2023 mock draft. If you missed the first round, I'll have that linked here in just a second. But I just want to let you guys know that on Tuesday, December 27th at 1 p.m. Eastern, noon Central Time, we are going to be running through a live startup dynasty draft. So if you want to hop in and be a part of that, get your questions answered live, jump in and see how we value our dynasty players right now. Tuesday, December 27th at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. And then, like I said, if you missed the first round of this 2023 way too early mock draft, you can check that video out right up here.